Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Hi, everybody. Okay, I'll fully admit here, some of this episode is just going to be kind of scattered. I have notes, of course, and I think I have everything organized here, but it's still a little scattered, so my apologies. I just have a number of things that I want to cover here, and a number of things, actually, that I need to read, and certainly want to read and bring to your attention. But again, it's kind of all over the place, so I've done my best to kind of put it in some, coherent order, but we'll see what happens. Either way, I just think it's good information, and I'm just moving this along your way so it can give you something to think about. So what I want to do is I'd rather start right here and just kind of use this sort of as a jumping point when it comes to how having too much law in our country and in any country is really the problem. And then, of course, we know why people advocate for more law, because it's more control. And anytime there's more control and more law, there's more lobbying and there's more money. And you can destroy people with too much law. And then, of course, you can bend the law because people don't have the money nor the means nor the energy to fight back and defend themselves. So in the past, I referenced Neil Gorsuch's book, the Supreme Court Justice, his most recent book titled Overruled: The Human Toll of Too Much Law. Now, he's not the only person who wrote this book or did the writing. Another individual by the name of Janie Neitz wrote part of this, or if not most of it, because in a lot of cases, again, these individuals who work in Washington, or certainly those in the media, don't write their own books. There's usually a co-author who does the vast majority of the writing. Either way, at the beginning of this book is a very interesting story of an Ohio couple who the man of the couple, John Yates is his name, he and his wife Sandra, and it has to do with when they moved to Florida. She was working as a paralegal. They were raising their grandchildren, and he was working as a charter fisherman. I'm going to do my best to summarize this story without reading it verbatim, but this again has everything to do with government overreach. Essentially, back in 2007, he was fishing, as he normally did, on his charter boat in the Gulf of Mexico, and then he came upon an agent an inspection agent, basically, out in a boat, safety inspection agent, and then boarded his ship, and then started counting his fish and measuring his fish one at a time, and he had about 2,000 pounds of fish in total. In the book here, it says, and this is kind of important because it sets up the rest of it, it says, quote, "After spending hours rummaging through the pile, the agent declared his verdict. According to his measurements, which John disputed, 72 red grouper were under the 20-inch harvesting minimum set by the current federal regulations. True, even by the agent's account, only 3 fish were under 19 inches, and each was at least 18.75 inches. But all the same, 72 undersized fish it was. The agent ordered John to store the undersized fish in separate crates, issued a citation, and left. After John returned to the dock a few days later, the agent measured the fish again. This time, though, the agent found 69 undersized fish and 72. What's more, the agent's measurements didn't quite match those that he had taken days earlier while on board. From that and other evidence, the agent grew suspicious that the fish at the dock were not the same fish he had measured at sea. Still, nothing seemed to come of it. John didn't hear any more from authorities for almost 3 years, that is, until the day armed agents showed up at his door." So, again, long story short, they were directly implying that the fish were not the proper size, which of course the vast majority were. They had him store the fish in a different container, in a different temperature, and let days pass. And anybody who's ever done basically any fishing knows fully that the size of fish change. Of course, they can shrink based on temperature. They lose water, things of that nature, and they lose blood. In this particular case, though, the agents ended up ultimately arresting him and charging him with a violation of what's called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. And then it says in the book here, and I'm quoting, it says, as John learned after his arrest, however, the law is written in broad terms. The act doesn't just make it unlawful to destroy financial records or documents with the intent to impede, obstruct, or influence, quote unquote, a federal investigation. It also prohibits the destruction of any other tangible object, quote unquote, for the same purpose. And according to the government, John had done just that. So what the agent again was accusing him of was quite literally throwing all of his fish back and then producing different fish upon the second investigation of this agent days after returning to shore and re-measuring them and recounting them, essentially. There, of course, was no proof of that, and that's probably not what happened, because that seems completely outrageous, as even John Yates and even Sandra Yates mentioned throughout. With that said, again, long story short here, it ended up costing the Yateses at least approximately, estimated anyway, so they say, over $600,000 to defend themselves. Now, fortunately, Sandra Yates was a paralegal, so her research skills on what was lawful and what was not certainly benefited them greatly. They ended up finally taking the case to the Supreme Court, many of which cases, of course, never even see the light of day in the Supreme Court, but it did. And the entire charges and all of the felony violations, so to speak, were overruled and overturned, rather. So, again, they didn't get their money back. At least there's no indication that they got their money back. But I wanted to bring this story up because it's a perfect example, again, of what happens when government creates too much law and then they single out an individual to destroy. Again, could be a random person. There doesn't have to be any necessary motive. But it's also perfect evidence that government doesn't want to be wrong, and that government will do whatever it has to do to make sure that it's not wrong. Because admitting fault on the part of government is something, again, that they're not going to do. Even, again, showing up to the Supreme Court and ultimately hearing the case and having the entire thing completely overruled and the previous judgments overruled, not only did it cost the Yates family, like I said earlier, approximately $600,000 to defend themselves, where, of course, they lost everything. He lost his fishing business. I believe she ended up losing her job as well, because she was spending, of course, a great deal of time trying to defend themselves and do the research on that as well. But ultimately, not only did it cost, again, them $600,000 over the course of time with everything that they lost, but the actual investigation on the part of government was over $11 million. So it cost the government $11 million to do an investigation on something that small and something that insignificant, while, again, completely destroying the finances of a family. This is government in a nutshell. I hope you're also thinking of school boards as I'm describing this. This is what they do. They waste money. They single out individuals and or groups, as you've heard in previous episodes, certainly that I've brought up recently. And then they aren't interested in the facts. And then they lie to the public and they tell everybody that they care about everybody's feelings and they want the right thing to happen and they want everybody to be safe and blah, blah, blah. When in fact, that's not it. It boils down to them catering to the mob and those who, of course, whine the most, because the squeaky wheel gets the grease, after all. And then at the end of the day, they end up gaslighting everybody into believing that the right thing is going to happen, when in fact, it all just boils down to them not wanting to be wrong. And they don't want to take a stand in one direction or another. And then, of course, what recourse do people have when they're actually in the right? This is the problem with too much law. This is the problem with government. This is the problem with our participation in all of this. Our participation in all of this has to stop. Again, everybody can keep juggling all they want, in particular when it comes to the American K-12 school system. They can keep acting like this is the place to be. They can keep acting like they don't know anything different and, they just want things to be better. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not that the right thing is always easy to obtain. But if you're consistently fighting for the right thing to happen and your participation is the only thing causing you to consistently fight, then stop participating. In the case of the Yateses, however, they knew what was right, and they didn't quit, and they took it all the way to the top. This, too, is what government does not comprehend about us human beings, that every now and again, you're going to come across Americans who won't quit. They won't give up. That when you poke them, as it's been stated on numerous occasions, these are the individuals who just wanted to be left alone. But the most dangerous person who exists, and the most dangerous people who exist in a positive way, are the people who you refuse to leave alone. And people have to understand, too, that it's not individuals going after other individuals where government is not present. Most arguments, I would go so far as to say, and most disagreements have to do with individuals because of government intervention, because of government oversight, because of government involvement and manipulation. Whether those people are working for government or they're not, but it's usually a government-related argument that's taking place. That is really the root of the so-called problem. And this is consistent throughout history, and this is going to continue to be the case. There are too many laws on the books. This is another example as to why I'm an abolitionist. These laws have to be abolished. Such laws like that and ticky-tack laws like that, when it comes to the Yates family and the measurement of fish, that's how small it can actually become. So, again, it's one of many examples. There are endless examples, but just because someone is attempting to do the right thing doesn't mean that the right thing is going to happen. I think we all know that, and I think that pretty much goes without saying. But with that said, let me move on to a couple of other things here, just geopolitically as well. First of all, as you might expect, there's more election chatter on a constant basis. I know a lot of these back and forths are sort of for the slave class, but I find some of this just situationally interesting, which is why I bring it up here on the show. But there was this particular post on GreatAwakening.win, kind of an interesting summary of what may be to come here. But Mike Adams put this post out also, and let me just read his post first. Again, you can take this with a grain of salt. There's basically a lot of quote-unquote date fagging that's taking place right now. Again, where people are saying on particular dates, this is going to happen, or by this particular date, this thing is going to happen. Again, I'm not interested in the dates as much as I am people just being aware of possible scenarios. That's all. So here's what he said the other day. He said, quote, "Yesterday I interviewed Sheriff Richard Mack, who of course is out of Arizona. He said he told me that according to his intel sources, October 7th is going to be a day of widespread terrorism attacks across America carried out by illegals who are opposed to Biden-Harris support for Israel's war on Palestine." Okay, seems a bit of a stretch, but all right. It says the fact that Democrats continue to send bombs to Israel while keeping the border wide open is practically an invitation for domestic terrorism to occur. Matt Bracken repeatedly speaks about the pre-staging of weapon systems across America to be picked up by illegal invaders, terrorists. And those weapons include full auto AKs, mortars, etc. I have other sources backing up the intel on the presence of weapon systems in stash houses and storage lockers across the country. Also still missing is at least one surface-to-air missile, it says system, that can reportedly take down a commercial jet or even, God forbid, something like Trump's private jet, which is why I previously shared this warning with Trump's security team as best I could. Everybody needs to be prepared on October 7th to potentially lose power, water, 911 services, road access, ports, refineries, and other possible targets. I'll cover this more in an upcoming podcast. The Sheriff Richard Mack interview will be published in a day or two. We all have roughly 5 weeks to get fully prepared for the possibility of serious disruptions. And let us pray that these warnings turn out to be inaccurate, because want peace and civility as we head into the election, unquote. Again, a lot of these are scenarios that have been discussed in the past, and those of us who are prepared for just about anything are 100% fine with it. But, I don't know. I hope it's not designed to stir people crazy, and I hope it's not designed to panic people, nor fear buy or, engage in any of that. Run to the grocery store, get as much toilet paper as humanly possible, whatever. People should hopefully just have these necessary things on hand to survive without government or corporation intervention. And just, again, not beg for more government to be the solution to our problems, but understand that we can solve our own. That much of, again, the problems that are created are in fact by government, but also those who are attempting to profit off of chaos. And I hope you fully understand that I'm not one of these people. All I do is, well, it's not all I do, but I certainly bring up a number of different scenarios that I think are worth thinking about because this is critical thinking. This has to do, of course, with the world we live in. And critical thinking, as we know, is in short supply. But theorizing about particular things and taking numerous scenarios into consideration is good practice. This is just a good thing to do. So again, the people who aren't even considering any of this, the completely pacified and the totally inoculated from any semblance of critical thought, these are the individuals who are going to be left out to dry when something changes, in particular drastically. I mean, those were the people panic buying back in 2020 and 2021. Those were the individuals actually doing that, and the rest of us were sitting back and saying, look at these people doing this. They're actually falling for this. So again, taking numerous scenarios into consideration is not a bad thing. It's not designed to panic. I certainly, again, am not in that camp. I'm not interested in that. I don't have promo codes. I don't have things to sell people. You can get a 15% discount, again, from Armreg, the book publishing company, and I don't even get any kickbacks from it. So my weapon is knowledge, and my weapon is discounts on books. Again, it's not storable food, storable water, and weapons of any kind. That's completely up to you. And those are things, again, that I would consider people look into without a doubt. But anyway, there was that. Now, again, regarding the slave class and sheep game of the sort of political back and forth, there's this too. This was on GreatAwakening.win. It was titled Endgame, a variation of X-22. So this is probably an individual, again, who watches Dave on X-22 Report with regularity, and this was their particular breakdown. And again, who knows? It could be X-22's breakdown also, but it's interesting. And again, if this comes true, this would be absolutely hilarious. I can't believe that people would buy into this. But if they did, I would think that it would do a couple of things. It would speed up the bad guys' plans. And at the exact same time, make them basically look more embarrassing and more embarrassed than they already are right now. So here's what it said, quote, Things never really turn out the way I expect them to, so here are some ramblings. They said Kamala bombs in the debate. These are all in sort of asterisks. They said Obama makes the moves to kick her and Tim Walz out. The goal of the establishment is to put up a candidate that can justify the behind-the-scenes cheating. Biden and Kamala both couldn't justify the close poll numbers, and definitely do not justify winning against Trump 51-49. They just need to put up a plausible candidate that fits the popularity narrative to justify the cheating numbers. And then they have a few bullet points here, and the first one says this. Michelle Obama steps in with Gavin Hairgel Newsom. This ticket will justify the cheat. They will manufacture massive popularity, go gaga over them for the last 40 to 50 days, and they will justify the cheating that will be prepared via electronic voting. The wild card, they said. I think the cyber threats the deep state is warning about is justified this time. It will not be the black hats that will carry it out, but the white hats. Cyber attack by white hats wipe out electronic voting and cheating, infrastructure, forcing the scumbags to go to paper ballots. Massive hue and cry is made to delay elections, etc. Rioting erupts by the illegal army, shut down by military intervention. Early voting is thrown into the garbage. One-day voting takes place under military supervision. We know who wins, unquote. Now again, I don't want to I don't want to make this about me. But you heard me mention a while back that I find this fascinating not because of, well, I'll tell you what, let's do this first. Let's run through this scenario like it's absolutely real. First of all, I think this is super funny because of one thing which immediately jumped to mind. I'm already seeing Harris signs in people's front yards. Already. I mean, here it is, the beginning of September. September 1st is as I'm recording this. There's already Harris signs in people's yards. Imagine those poor bastards having to pull those signs out to only replace them with a Obama Newsom sign. I mean, that alone is worth the price of admission. It's too funny. I mean, you talk about NPCs. They already are, of course. We fully understand that, but wow, wouldn't that be just absolutely hilarious? Now, I don't think personally that a big Mike Obama and Gavin Newsom ticket justifies the cheat. I don't think that's some election ticket that's going to justify any cheat going forward. They are cheaters. Big Mike's tricking everybody into believing that it's a woman when in fact it's not, and Gavin Newsom's tricking everybody into believing that he's an upright guy when clearly he isn't. For a variety of reasons. These are criminals, all of them. But again, the entire scenario of speeding up the bad guys' plans has been an element that has been in play here for a very long time. That's what the Q drops were about also. See, they were designed to wake people up who had previously been pacified by all of the things that exist around us. But once that took place, you had numerous people waking up all over the world, hundreds of millions of people, and sharing this information everywhere, and then learning copious amounts of other information, and then, of course, breaking through the shells of the pacification that exists, and critically thinking about multiple scenarios and thinking multidimensionally, rather, for the very first time in their lives. This is a very good thing, myself included. This is a fantastic thing. But with that said, speeding up the enemy's plans is a part of this plan here, and it's been working this whole time. There's the one thing that has not been played out yet, which is massive power outages. Given the fact that we have voting coming up here, certainly in the state of Ohio, as I said, 1 month from now, that alone is going to change numerous things. If there are numerous power outages, even during early voting, this is going to slow everything down and make almost everything impossible to count logically, which means you would have to have some kind of military intervention, as even I've said here in the past, that would kick out the riffraff when it comes to counting votes and bring in individuals wearing fatigues to count votes. Now, I understand the historic implication of that, and that might not necessarily be the best way going forward, but it would mean paper ballots. It would mean that there would be some kind of a copy that you could walk away with after you vote to prove that in fact you did vote and who you voted for. But that this would be something that would be not overseen by civilians, but by individuals carrying a gun wearing fatigues. Like I said, I don't think that's a good long-term plan in our country, but given the amount of illegality and fraud that exists, it would be something that would certainly shake up the masses, and it would manipulate the left into understanding why this is taking place, because again, whose watch is this happening under? It's happening under, quote unquote, as far as they think, Biden's watch or Kamala Harris's watch. So if there's voting irregularities and outages for the entire month before actual election day, again, whose fault's that? Trump's insulated. Not to mention, this is kind of important too, if Trump is quote unquote in jail, think of the optics of that. Well, it can't be Trump. It can't be him. Even the left-wing normies wouldn't believe that. Well, he's in jail. It can't be his fault. I mean, this plays right into the good guy's hands, this entire scenario that's being wargamed. I mean, it's crystal clear to me, unless I'm completely delusional, but it seems like, again, this entire thing is being wargamed by the good guys in order to force the bad guys' hands, to put the bad guys in what I've called Zootsfang on a constant basis. Every time they make a move, it makes things worse for them. Because again, they're controlling the entire thing from behind the scenes. But people looking at it one-dimensionally at face value don't understand that, because they're really the people that are still being sought after in order to wake up. I think it's fascinating. Again, if something like that actually happened, it'd be absolutely hilarious. We would know what was taking place and potentially why. But the people who wouldn't, I mean, imagine that. All those, what do you call them, canvassers or electioneering individuals, the people who stand outside of polling places and tell you who to vote for and stand around with their own, their own little handout pamphlets, and everybody on those pamphlets is always a left-winger, somebody on the left that you need to vote for, and this, that, and the other. All those people would be gone. All of these voting precincts and voting sites would be closed off to just people voting. You're in, you're out. You're not lingering around asking people if they need help. You're not, again, giving them handouts, none of that. There would be actual people in fatigues. I think that would be pretty flippin' cool. Just from an optics standpoint again. I think that'd be a neat thing to see, at the very least, once. But we'll see. Again, it's a scenario. Time will tell. I don't know if it's actually going to take place or not, but it's fun to think about. I find it interesting. Let me mention this now, and this is a few things again from last week that sort of tie in with some of the things I brought up geopolitically last week too. Again, I find this stuff interesting, and a lot of this is predictable as well. You may recall the woman who spoke at the Surprise, Arizona City Council meeting and was addressing specifically the entire council, but more specifically the actions of their lawyer and legal representation. And she was bringing up his lack of ethics or some conflicts of interest or the amount of money that he gets paid and a number of other things. And it was only a matter of time, of course, before a First Amendment law firm came to her defense, which is exactly what has happened here. It said that last Monday, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, or FIRE, a First Amendment advocacy group, indicated plans to sue the city of Surprise after its mayor had local activist Rebecca Massey detained for scrutinizing a city employee during the locality's August 20th city council meeting. It says, quote, "The First Amendment protects every American's right to criticize public officials." FIRE, F-I-R-E, attorney Connor Fitzpatrick said in a statement given to the Federalist that, quote, "The last thing people should fear when they go to a city council meeting to make their voice heard is leaving in handcuffs." Now, it's ironic because I came across this FIRE organization in another post, and I posted this FIRE organization on Gab, F-I-R-E, because I basically said, okay, can certain groups like this and legal groups be trusted to accurately represent everyone and anyone who has the right to free speech? I think time will tell on that, because unfortunately I think that sometimes these lawyer groups reach out to other individuals in order to, again, maybe take advantage, maybe not, maybe get a little attention toward their group or not. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, this FIRE group, with that story aside, which, by the way, it was predictable that she would get legal representation, and I'm glad that she is, and she should sue them to the ground and then come back and say whatever she wants to say because she has the right to do that. With that aside for a second now, the FIRE organization on their website, which is, I believe is, let me see here real quick. It is thefire.org. They have tips for students and tips for parents on going back to school, which again should be an indictment on all school environments, you would think. And again, the group claims to represent just about everybody and says that they do represent just about everybody, that they stand up for the gay agenda, they stand up for LGBTQXYZ. They claim, of course, that they stand up for Republicans, libertarians, Democratic socialists, those who affiliate with no party at all, every religion, so they say. Again, they're based out of Philadelphia. It's hard to know. Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression is what FIRE stands for. Me personally, again, I'm not one for these giant legal groups that claim to defend anybody or anything all of the time. I'm not one to put my trust in them whatsoever. There's usually far too money behind these organizations. And in many cases, there is almost always a political agenda. In fact, as I said, I put this FIRE group in a post about it basically on Gab, and someone responded and they said the following. They said, I only took a shallow dive and the scent of socialism, communism was very strong. Working on the youth on campuses, they say, of quote unquote higher education, doing the recruiting. The president and CEO is a big fan of Ira Glasser, ACLU. What more needs said, unquote. Again, I'm not an NGO fan by any stretch. You never really know what these groups are seeking to do when it comes to just beyond making a profit. Are they data mining? Are they data harvesting? Are they gathering lists of people who affiliate with other individuals who stand up for the First Amendment? It's really hard to know. That's why me personally, again, walking away from these environments as schools would certainly avoid the headache. And I mean, let's face it, this particular case regarding Rebecca Massey in Surprise, Arizona, it got the attention that it received because, of course, she was illegally shut down in the middle of the meeting. Yes, her First Amendment rights were certainly stomped on. There's no doubt about that. And then, of course, she was detained, cited, and then let go. All of that, of course, being illegal. This, of course, is the oversight that I've said before that we as a public have over elected officials. That when a school board, as I've brought up in the past, they always will introduce the public comment section by saying, don't make fun of us. Don't say something that we disagree with. Don't single out anybody. That's exactly what we get to do. And all this is showing is that city councils and school boards and chambers of commerce and or county commissioners and all these meetings where the public can show up and talk, that they all receive the same memo on what to tell people during the public comment section, not caring nor knowing nor even thinking about the fact that it is a violation of everyone's rights. That you can stand up there and say whatever you want about any individual and you can highlight what that particular person has done. Now, what you can't really do is lie about them, but you can ask questions. And you can certainly, again, inquire as to why a person is in a particular position or what a person has done or not done. You get to do this. But again, it is us versus the government. This is the Civil War right now. It's becoming more and more evident that this is in fact the case. And of course, it's been going on since the beginning of time. But it's not changing. Now, let me move on here and mention this too. I found this interesting. Again, this should show you the Civil War that even exists, certainly within the military, thereby almost providing direct evidence that there is a continuity of government to some extent, and that some are in the know and some are not. Or potentially everyone is in the know on the military side of things, but even the individuals in the military fully understand that there's a civil war among their own fellow soldiers. There was this from the New York Post, and it was titled, Army Rebukes Trump Campaign Over Arlington Cemetery Altercation. and photo op, which Biden used in both of his presidential campaigns. So you essentially have a United States Army issued statement saying that they don't agree that Donald Trump was there or needed to be there to represent or stand alongside Gold Star families who lost their children and family members in Afghanistan during the alleged pullout over there. And that, again, this is normally something for Biden, and President Biden should be the one who does it, and blah, blah, blah. Well, why wasn't he then? If that's true, then why wasn't he there? Is this an acknowledgement from the U.S. Army themselves, at least some within, that Biden is not, in fact, the President of the United States? And that clearly Donald Trump is the commander-in-chief, but that they might not like the fact that he's the commander-in-chief? Again, that entire scenario I found to be absolutely fascinating because, again, from an optics standpoint, it was clear that he's in charge to some extent, that he's at the very least the spokesperson for the real people who are in charge behind the scenes. That's my opinion. I'm not the only one that shares that, but yeah, I just think from an Army standpoint, it continues to show that there is a division there. That yes, there's these TV generals, and yes, there's these queers that are dressing up the way that they're dressing up and being thrust to the forefront as if they're in charge of something when in fact they may not actually be. So who's to know? But it's just more food for thought and certainly more of an optics examination in this warfare and in this ongoing warfare. There's also this too, and I want to read this story very quickly. This is sort of a local issue, certainly in my state, in the city of Columbus, Ohio. This right here, again, is proof of more laws that are on the books that shouldn't be, and that when you're trying to help someone, and you're trying to help someone figure out that maybe something illegal has transpired, in particular when that someone is government, that you as a citizen might be, certainly in this case, held accountable legally, because government always has something to hide, and government doesn't want to look like they're incompetent, and government doesn't want to be wrong. So there was this particular article from the website Ars Technica, arstechnica.com, and it was titled, City of Columbus Sues Man After He Discloses Severity of Ransomware Attack. It says, Mayor said data was unusable to criminals, researcher proved otherwise. This was from August 30th. Here's what it says. Again, it's right up there in the book of, I can't believe this is happening, but then again, if government's involved, you'd better believe it. It says, quote, a judge in Ohio has issued a temporary restraining order against a security researcher who presented evidence that a recent ransomware attack on the city of Columbus scooped up reams of sensitive personal information contradicting claims made by city officials. The order, issued by a judge in Ohio's Franklin County, which is where Columbus is, came after the city of Columbus fell victim to a ransomware attack on July 18th that siphoned 6.5 terabytes of the city's data. A ransomware group known as Rhysyda, Rhysida, if I'm saying that right, took credit for the attack and offered to auction off the data with a starting bid of about $1.7 million in Bitcoin. On August 8th, after the auction failed to find a bidder, Rhysyda released what is said was about 45% of the stolen data of the group's dark web site, which is accessible to everyone, or anyone rather, with a Tor browser. It says dark web not readily available to public. Really? Question mark. It says Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther said on August 13th that a breakthrough, quote unquote, in the city's forensic investigation of the breach found that the sensitive files Rhysyda obtained were either encrypted or corrupted, making them unusable to the thieves. Ginther went on to say the data's lack of integrity was likely the reason the ransomware group had been unable to auction off the data. Shortly after Ginther made his remarks, security researcher David Leroy Ross contacted local news outlets and presented evidence that showed the data Rashida published was fully intact and contained highly sensitive information regarding city employees and residents. Ross, who uses the alias Connor Goodwolf, presented screenshots and other data that showed the files Rashida had posted included names from domestic violence cases and social security numbers for police officers and crime victims. Some of the data spanned years. On Thursday, the city of Columbus sued Ross for alleged damages for criminal acts, invasion of privacy, negligence, and civil conversion. The lawsuit claimed that downloading documents from the dark web site run by ransomware attackers amounted to him, quote-unquote, interacting with them and required special expertise and tools. The suit went on to challenge Ross, alerting reporters to the information, which claimed would be easily obtained by others. It says, quote, only individuals willing to navigate and interact with the criminal element on the dark web who also have the computer expertise and tools necessary to download data from the dark web would be able to do so, unquote, city attorneys wrote. It says, quote, dark web posted data is not readily available for public consumption. Defendant is making it so. This is nuts. This is so crazy. It says the same day, a Franklin County judge granted the city's motion for a temporary restraining order against Ross. It bars the researcher, quote, from accessing and or downloading and or disseminating, unquote, any city files that were posted to the dark web. The motion was made and granted ex parte, meaning in secret, before Ross was informed of it or had an opportunity to present his case. In a press conference Thursday, Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein, every single time, defended his decision to sue Ross and obtain the restraining order. He said, quote, this is not about freedom of speech or whistleblowing, he said. This is about the downloading and disclosure of stolen criminal investigatory records. This effect is to get Ross to stop downloading and disclosing stolen criminal records to protect public safety, unquote. And then the office went on to make a statement. Attempts to reach Ross were not successful. It says, as shown above in the screenshot of the Rashida dark web site on Friday morning, the sensitive data remains available to anyone who looks for it. Friday's order may bar Ross from accessing the data or disseminating it to reporters, but it has no effects on those who plan to use the data for malicious purposes. The point is this. Government screwed up. Government got hacked. And their justification for getting hacked and not paying off the ransomware is simply blowing off the subject by saying that the information is encrypted and or useless or not important. Again, if people have learned nothing over the course of history, that when government says, in particular American government, let alone world government or anybody else, when they openly say something is not important, chances are it is. When somebody says in government that something is very important and everybody needs to panic and watch out, chances are you don't have to. It's opposite land all of the time. It's just opposite day over and over again. Here you have a citizen who's more knowledgeable about the content that was hacked by an outside agency, allegedly. And then, of course, this information was brought to the attention of government themselves. They blow it off. They say, no, it doesn't matter. No one can access it. It's useless. Who cares? And then the guy who's more knowledgeable about the subject openly says, this is not encrypted. You have personal information on here of American citizens. This is not a good thing. You need to do something about this. They sue him. They go after him to keep his mouth shut. So, of course, the question comes to mind, what does government have to hide in this case? What does Columbus, Ohio government have to hide? Now, I'm going to cherry pick one particular subject of what it might have to hide. And this comes from the Federation for American Immigration Reform, or FAIR. I, of course, don't trust these people. I just don't. But either way, there's a list here of the top 10 sanctuary cities in America. A lot of the usual suspects, as you would expect. Denver, Seattle, San Francisco, Columbus, Ohio, of which I'll read here in a second, San Jose, San Diego, Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York City. But here's what it says under Columbus, Ohio. It says, quote, a city of almost 900,000 residents, Columbus does not refer to itself as a sanctuary city, but follows sanctuary policies. It became a sanctuary city in practice in 2015 when a police division directive was adopted that banned local law enforcement from detaining or arresting illegal aliens for ICE without a warrant or observation of a crime, rather. It says the directive also rules out the use of city funds, personal, etc., quote, for the sole purpose of detecting or apprehending any person based on suspected immigration status, except in response to a court order, unquote. In 2017, Columbus Mayor Andrew J. Ginther, Democrat, shocking, issued an executive order stating that, quote, no city department or employee may use city monies, equipment, or personnel for the sole purpose of detecting or apprehending persons based on suspected immigration status unless in response to a court order, unquote. Well, I bet some of that documentation has something to do with a boatload of illegal aliens, just a hunch. But again, perfect example of what happens when you catch government trying to sweep something under the rug that they have everything to do with, and you say, hey, government, you might want to take a look at this thing that just happened to you. And government goes, no, don't pay attention to that. Don't look over there. Don't make that available to people, because if you do, we'll come after you. Well, that means they have something to hide. It can't get any clearer, I don't think, but there you go. That's what you get for trying to help government. Been there, done that. Okay. With that said, let me move on to some jab-related things, and then I want to bring up a little bit of the wireless body area network. This continues to be a subject that I'm learning a great deal about. As you know, I've put together probably 2 or 3 Substacks about it while highlighting the work of Sabrina Wallace. And I'm going to continue to do that. In fact, I'm going to get into the business of blockchain in a future Substack, so stay tuned for that in the future. Because, of course, that plays right into the wireless body area network and the weaponization of wireless environments against the human body. All they have to do is turn up the frequency, ladies and gentlemen, and people get sick. And you don't have to be jabbed in order to get sick from an increased frequency of this wireless radiation. And, of course, the nanotechnology and biosensors that exist within people, whether you're jabbed or even unjabbed. But with that said, just to sort of lay out the false narrative here, as this continues to be laid out by numerous outlets, this was from The Hill last week, just a couple of days ago, actually, and it was titled, Summer COVID Surge Shows We May Have to Return to 2020 Pandemic Measures. Now, I don't think this is going to happen, but again, The Hill is not a conservative outlet. They may pretend that they are from time to time, but even they are perpetuating the lie of viruses and mutations of viruses and a number of other things. And then, of course, stirring the pot that everybody needs to go back to wearing masks and all this other nonsense. With that said, I also wanted to bring this up too. This was from Dr. Makis, and this kind of dates back to the ivermectin debate that was taking place basically a couple of weeks ago. That ivermectin is complete poison, and it should never be used for anything, and it's not a depopulation agenda, so to speak, but it can have negative ramifications on reproductive organs and fertility. Of that, I am almost certain that that's the case. However, there are endless cancers that it has been proven and continues to be proved it can be remarkably valuable for in treating. Because as we know, the typical standard cancer protocol, so to speak, certainly with chemotherapy, does not work on the jabbed. In fact, it probably makes things a whole lot worse for them, hence the, of course, phrase turbo cancer, and where that all comes about. Once these treatments that are stereotypical for cancer patients start, not taking the jabs into consideration, you're not looking for the problem, You're just treating the so-called symptoms. Well, again, if the symptoms are perpetuated by an ever-present shot and nanotech that exists inside of the human body, and you're using your standard protocol, i.e. radiation, more radiation, and chemotherapy, that's going to cause the person to die faster, hence the phrase turbo cancer. So with that said, Mac has put this out a while back, just a couple of weeks ago, and it said the following. It said, tested against 28 types of cancer, which cancers were most sensitive to ivermectin, which were the least sensitive. It says a research group from Mexico investigated ivermectin in Cancer paper from 2020 of the authors Juarez and others. Anti-tumor effects of ivermectin at clinically feasible concentrations support its clinical development as a repositioned cancer drug. It says this paper is behind a paywall, not accessible to the general population. Ivermectin was tested at 2 milligrams per kilogram per day, which translates to roughly 5 UM in vitro concentration. The most sensitive cancer cell lines were the following. Number 1, ovarian. Number 2, breast cancer. Number 3, glioblastoma. Number 4, lung cancer. Number 5, colon cancer. Number 6, uterine SCC. Number 7, hepatocellular cancer. I'm saying that right. Number 8, breast BC. Number 9, pancreatic cancer. And number 10, endometrial cancer. It then said the following here. It says least sensitive were, number 1, osteosarcoma, 2, gastric, 3, melanoma. And then it said, although lymphoma and leukemia cells, or cell lines rather, appear to be more resistant to ivermectin, ivermectin has a significant impact on those cells' ability to form colonies. So yes, ivermectin is useful against both lymphomas and leukemias. Ivermectin also goes after cancer stem cells, which tend to be resistant to chemotherapy. It says, quote, ivermectin has a preferential depletion effect on the cancer stem-like cell population. It says, quote, we observed that among all the evaluated cell lines, a decrease in cell viability and clonogenicity is more evident in the cancer stem-like cells than in their parental population, unquote. It says key findings of the study said the following. At a human dose of 2 milligrams per kilogram, ivermectin can achieve anti-cancer effects such as cell cycle arrest or inhibit proliferation, preferential inhibition of cancer stem-like cells, synergize with several chemotherapy drugs, and inhibit tumor growth in a breast cancer mouse model. He said, remember, turbo cancers caused by Pfizer and Moderna's COVID-19 mRNA vaccines are very resistant to chemotherapy. Ivermectin can overcome this chemo resistance. This is the first study I've seen that has tested as many as 28 cancer types with ivermectin. Incredible. Unquote. So again, it's not that ivermectin doesn't have multiple uses. It certainly does. Is it to be used when a person's not sick? No, it shouldn't be. Just like all medicine. You don't take medicine when you're not ill, because it can make you ill. It can go after numerous cells in the body that shouldn't be gone after, that are there on purpose to do a very specific job. So, again, you'd think that'd be common sense among many, but here's what I want to do. I want to end with this. This is a particular article that I came across during one of Sabrina Wallace's presentations on the Wireless Body Area Network, and how, of course, there is no coronavirus. There is no virus, of course. There is frequency, and that is what has caused people to become ill, and then, of course, scaring them into believing that there's a virus so that they inoculate themselves with copious amounts of metals, graphene, nanotech, and a number of other things. And then, of course, you turn up that frequency among those individuals, and it'll make them sick even more. Not to mention, of course, the old phrase of gain of function, and how the entire phrase essentially means creating poison that is more easily transmissible from one person to the next, so that if person A injects themselves with such poison, the poison that is in their bloodstream is more transmissible via electromagnetism to person B or person C or D, E, F, G all the way through. But this is just one example that should prove to you that the wireless body area network is directly correlated to quote-unquote coronavirus. They openly admit it. Again, keep in mind, it's a published paper with three authors here in Springer Nature by, again, PubMed. And this is in the Arab Journal of Science and Engineering, if I'm getting that correct. This was published in 2021, February 26th of 2021. Again, keep in mind, you're going to hear the word virus and COVID in this, but that's not what to focus on. The part to focus on in this abstract that I'm going to read is the wireless body area network. They're telling you that they can turn up the frequency and make you ill. This is, in fact, even a subject that Dr. Brian Ardis is starting to bring up with more regularity, which is a good thing. Again, Sabrina Wallace has been talking about this for a very long time. I'm going to continue to talk about this because, as you've heard me say before, and as I've said in Substack, I believe that this is the most important thing going on right now. So much so, and here's one of the tests where you can figure out if that's the case, is if you were to take a paper like this and expose it to anybody, city council members, government, you name it, anybody in government, certainly in local government or even law enforcement, they would not be able to comprehend it. They wouldn't be able to understand the depth of this evil. That's usually, in my opinion, the litmus test of what is really the tip of the spear here going forward. So I'll be honest with you. I'm a little annoyed with all the, political talk back and forth about this, that, and the other. And I know that I brought up some fun theories at the beginning of the show and certainly situations to think about and things to be vigilant about. I find that interesting to think about, but this right here is something I believe that anybody can understand as long as you have an accurate basis for what's really happening here when it comes to real illness and how people really get sick. They're getting sick from poisoning. They're getting sick from frequency. They're getting sick from electricity. It's not something you swallow in the air, although they're making it to where that will ultimately be the case. But here was the title of this February 2021 peer-reviewed article. It was titled, quote, "An intelligent and energy-efficient wireless body area network to control coronavirus outbreak." It says the following, the abstract, quote, "The coronaviruses are a deadly family of epidemic viruses that can spread from one individual to another very quickly, infecting masses. It says the literature on epidemics indicates that the early diagnosis of a coronavirus infection can lead to a reduction in mortality rates. To prevent coronavirus disease 2019, COVID-19, so they say, from spreading, the regular identification and monitoring of infected patients are needed." It says, in this regard, wireless body area networks, or WBANs, can be used in conjunction with machine learning and the Internet of Things, IoT, to identify and monitor the human body for health-related information, which in turn can aid in the early diagnosis of diseases. I'm going to stop it there quickly. They're openly telling you what they want to do with you. They want to feed you a fairy tale, provide you a technological solution for your imaginary problem, to then kill you off quicker and monitor you. And once they do that, then they can turn up the frequency inside of you and around you, i.e. your kill box, and then wipe people out. This is one of the major reasons what has me scared to death of children and even staff members in American school buildings. The school building itself is a technological kill box now. It has been for quite some time. You have wireless computers everywhere in those environments. You have wireless iPads in their hands with regularity. You have every floor of every building tied up to the wireless network, and you have 5G towers in the parking lots. And you have, of course, jabbed staff members and jabbed children, by the way, many of which are continuing to fall dead all over the country and continuing to get sick as schools are continuing to close, even here in the month of what was August, and then, of course, September. I mean, this is continuing to happen. This should prove to people that it's not some seasonal thing. This is an ever-present electromagnetic field that exists around us that is making people ill. And to remove yourself from this field is arguably one of the first and best moves you can make. This abstract goes on here. It says, quote, "This paper proposes a novel coronavirus body area network, or COVBAN model, based on the Internet of Things technology as a real-time health monitoring system for the detection of the early stages of coronavirus infection using a number of wearable biosensors to examine the health status of the patient." That means that person's just going to keep getting sick, wearing all this shit on their body and not know why. All hooked up to the wireless system. It says the proposed COVBAN model is tested with 5 machine learning-based classification methods, including random forest, logistic regression, naive Bayes, if I'm saying that right, or yeah, I believe so, naive Bayes, support vector machine and multi-layer perception classifiers to optimize the accuracy of the diagnosis of COVID-19. For the long-term sustainability of the sensor devices, the development of energy-efficient wireless body area network is critical. Now, if that's true, why are people spitting on a piece of cardboard to tell them if they have COVID or not? So it's an open admission that the tests are fake. It's an open admission that they're fraudulent. So they're telling you, without telling you, that that's fake, but we have a better way of diagnosing something inside of you that actually isn't. That we have a way to diagnose something that doesn't exist using a method we don't have to use, but we're using it because we're telling you that it's the way moving forward. This is inside of the COVID Trojan horse. This is exactly what this is thrust to the forefront. And then ask yourselves, how many people are talking about this? Again, when I hear Donald Trump, I'll tell you, it bothers me. And there could be other meanings behind it that I'm unaware of, but when I hear Donald Trump in speeches talk about how we need more electricity and we need more power lines, or we need more this, that, or the other, I hope he's talking subliminally about free energy and that he's not talking about actual electric grids that are more likely to make us more ill than we already are. I'm hoping he's not talking about more 5G towers per se, but that he's actually talking about something like Tesla's free energy that, again, hopefully doesn't make people ill. But I'm not sure what to think about all that quite yet. But anyway, this abstract wraps up, and it says the following. It says, to address this issue, a long-range, or LORA, based Internet of Things program, long-range Internet of Things program, is used to receive biosensor signals from the patient and transmit them to the cloud directly for monitoring. The experimental results indicate that the proposed model using the random forest classifier outperforms models using the other classifiers, with an average accuracy of 88.6%. In addition, power consumption is reduced when LoRa, LoRa technology is used as a relay node. Again, this terrifies the shit out of me. It really does. The keywords for this article, if you were curious, are coronavirus, COVID-19, WBAN, wireless body area network, machine learning, Internet of Things, and biosensors. It's an open admission that not only do all of these things exist individually, but they exist collectively for the purposes, so they tell you, of better diagnosing something and or treating you. But keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, just to translate, we are the illness. We are the illness that they want dead. This is their way of tricking people into believing that they have a better way to monitor your quote-unquote health, which means, again, you still being alive, in order to ultimately eliminate you, i.e. the disease, you being the disease, me being the disease, and then using their technology and wireless environment to clasp down on all of us at the exact same time with the flick of a switch. That's why I have to stay on this subject. That's why I'm going to keep bringing this up on the show. I'm going to keep putting these out on Substack because more and more people need to be talking about this. This is terrifying. Talks about cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, affects large portions of the population. That's what it says in the introduction here. Diabetes, hyperthyroidism, cancer, etc. are rapidly growing. This is frightening. So here's what I'm going to do. Again, in the future, I'm going to throw together another Substack sort of outlining a lot of this information. Sabrina Wallace's Rumble channel, has all of the PDFs and numerous documents in the subject line and description of some of her most recent videos, which is Peace Synergy on Rumble. I've highlighted all of those, and I'm going to put them in a future Substack article regarding this specified subject so that you have those PDFs at your disposal also. I will also include these if I can remember to do it. I'll make a notation of it. That I'm going to put this, and it's certainly a great deal of these particular links on my actual website as well, so that you can access them yourself. Again, this is a subject I think that people need to learn more about. And they certainly, once they learn about it and can start to piece this together and understand that they're using this wireless network and building this around us basically as an invisible cage. But that cage has spikes on it. And that cage is designed to close in on top of us. And clearly, the end result is not a good thing. So, again, we can't fight back against the enemy if we don't learn what the enemy has planned and what the enemy has in store and using what particular method or what weapon against us. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I'll have more for Wednesday on a variety of issues. I already have a few things lined up, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for listening as always, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.